There's something nobody tells you about the people who actually have their lives together. They're not the ones posting about it. Think about the last time you saw someone online filming their 5 a.m. workout, their perfectly arranged desk, their color-coded planner with motivational stickers on every page. They have the aesthetic of discipline down perfectly. The lighting is good, the caption is inspiring, the comments are full of people saying they needed this today. Now think about the most genuinely organized, calm, and effective person you know in real life. The one who always seems to have bandwidth when everyone else is completely overwhelmed. The one whose life looks almost suspiciously under control. Not because everything is perfect, but because they seem to have some internal system that holds even when things get hard. Chances are those are two completely different people, and there's a very specific reason for that gap. It's not discipline in the conventional sense. It's not a rare personality trait. It's not a privileged schedule or a special set of circumstances. It's something measurable, learnable, and far less glamorous than anything you've seen on a productivity channel. Research in behavioral psychology has documented something that the entire self-help industry is financially motivated to ignore. Over 80% of people who publicly announce a significant life change abandon it within 60 days. Not because they're weak, not because they didn't want it badly enough, but because the act of announcing itself, the social performance of beginning, actually undermines the neurological process required to sustain change over time. The announcement becomes a substitute for the work rather than a catalyst for it. The people who genuinely reorganize their lives understand this, even if they've never read the research. They don't announce. They don't post. They don't film the beginning. They quietly, methodically, almost invisibly rearrange the architecture of how they live. And one day, weeks or months later, the people around them realize something fundamental has shifted. They just can't figure out when it happened or what caused it. This video is about exactly how they do it. 10 specific habits. Each one almost entirely invisible from the outside. Each one compounding silently over time into a life that most people spend decades trying to build through the wrong methods entirely. If this is the kind of content that actually moves something in you, psychology, real discipline, philosophy applied to daily life rather than just performed online, hit subscribe. Everything on this channel is built on that foundation. No hype, no performance, just frameworks that hold. Now let's go through all 10. Habit 1. They decide what the day is before the day has a chance to decide for them. Most people begin their mornings in a state of pure reaction. The alarm sounds, the hand reaches for the phone before, the eyes are fully open, and within 60 seconds they're already inside someone else's world. News headlines, notifications, messages that create immediate small anxieties, other people's opinions about things that have nothing to do with their actual life. And just like that, before a single intentional thought has been formed, the most valuable cognitive window of the entire day has been surrendered. Neuroscientists refer to the 60 to 90 minutes following waking as the period of peak prefrontal receptivity. Your prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for planning, intentional decision-making, and executive function, is at its highest state of readiness during this window. It hasn't yet been taxed by the accumulated decisions, emotional noise, and cognitive friction that accumulate as the day progresses. It is, in the most literal neurological sense, your sharpest moment, and most people hand it directly to their phone. The people who organize their lives in silence protect this window like it's the most valuable resource they have, because it is. Not with elaborate rituals, not with hour-long meditation sessions or cold plunges or 17-step protocols that require optimal conditions to execute. They protect it with one boundary, applied consistently. Nothing external enters the mind before the internal direction for the day has been set. One man who built a logistics company after years of what he described as genuine personal chaos, missed obligations, financial instability, relationships deteriorating from neglect, traced the beginning of his recovery to a single decision. He stopped touching his phone for the first 45 minutes after waking. During that time, he made coffee, sat in silence, and wrote 3 things on a single sheet of paper. The 3 specific outcomes that would make that particular day a success. Not a task list, not an ambition list. 3 concrete outcomes, small enough to be realistic, meaningful enough to matter. He has done this every morning for over 12 years. He said the compounding effect of that practice is something he genuinely struggles to explain to people because it sounds too simple to account for the results. But the math is straightforward. 3 moments of focused daily intention, roughly 1,000 days of genuine directional clarity every 3 years. That's not a morning routine, that's architecture. And from the outside, it looks like someone who simply has his life together naturally, which is exactly what silent organization always looks like to the people who haven't built it yet. Habit 2. They design their environment before willpower is ever required. There's a study from the 1990s that should permanently change how you think about self-discipline. Researchers tracking office eating behavior found that when a candy dish was placed on someone's desk versus positioned 6 feet away, consumption increased by an average of 9 pieces per day. 9 pieces from 6 feet of additional distance. The people eating more candy weren't weaker or less disciplined than the ones eating less. They were simply in a different physical arrangement. That finding isn't just about candy. It's a precise illustration of how human behavior actually works. We are profoundly, almost embarrassingly, shaped by the physical environment we move through every day. The clothes laid out the night before determine with remarkable reliability whether you exercise in the morning. The phone charger kept on the nightstand determines whether you scroll for 45 minutes before sleep. The empty notebook sitting on the kitchen counter determines whether your thoughts get captured and acted on or dissolve into nothing by afternoon. Every physical element of your environment is either making the behavior you want easier or making it harder. Most people have never made a single conscious decision about any of it. The people who quietly organize their lives become deliberate architects of their own space. They reduce friction for behaviors they want to repeat and deliberately introduce friction for behaviors they want to reduce. And the results they get from this approach consistently outperform anything that depends on daily willpower, motivation, or conscious effort. One woman went from serious credit card debt to a 6-month emergency fund in under 2 years without ever using a budgeting app, without attending a financial workshop, and without telling anyone she was doing it. What she actually did was redesign her physical environment 3 times. She put a whiteboard on her refrigerator with her savings goal written in large numbers, updated weekly. She removed all saved payment information from every browser on every device she owned. She stopped carrying her credit card and began carrying only a set amount of cash for daily expenses, making every discretionary purchase a conscious physical transaction rather than an effortless digital one. She put her debit card in a small lockbox kept in an inconvenient location. None of those changes required daily discipline. The environment did the work. She didn't have to be mentally strong every single day. She had to be intentional once, when she set up the system, and then the system ran itself. A college student described something similar. He went from failing 3 courses to making the dean's list after making exactly 1 environmental change. He moved his phone charger from his nightstand to the kitchen. That single decision eliminated an average of 50 minutes of late-night scrolling and added roughly 7 hours of sleep per week. 7 hours of additional cognitive recovery from moving a cable 6 feet. Not from developing iron willpower, from removing the path of least resistance to the thing that was destroying his performance. That's the principle in its purest form. Design the environment correctly, and the right behavior becomes the automatic behavior. You don't have to be your best self every day. You just have to live in a space that was designed by your best self. If you want a concrete system for building this kind of mental and behavioral discipline from the inside out, not just the environment but the internal architecture that supports it, the K.M.A method is a 5-minute daily practice designed exactly for that. Real structure, real results, no performance required. The link is in the description. Go check it out before we keep going. Habit 3. They change one thing completely before they touch anything else. This is the habit that most people intellectually understand and almost nobody actually practices, because it requires something that feels deeply counterintuitive in moments of genuine motivation: restraint. When clarity hits, when you have one of those moments where you can see exactly what needs to change and you genuinely want to change it, the instinct is to use all of that energy at once. New diet, new sleep schedule, new workout routine, new journaling habit, new approach to relationships, all starting immediately, all running simultaneously. And for about 10 to 14 days, it works. The motivation carries everything. Then one thing slips, then another. And because every piece of the new system was interdependent, the collapse is total. You're back to zero, with the additional psychological weight of another failed attempt sitting on top of everything else. The neuroscience behind this failure pattern is specific and consistent. Behavioral automaticity, the state in which a repeated action no longer requires conscious effort to execute and simply happens as a natural part of your day, takes time to develop. Research suggests the process requires somewhere between 4 and 10 weeks of consistent daily repetition for a single behavior. During that period, the brain is literally building new neural pathways, strengthening connections that reduce the cognitive cost of the big action over time. But this process has limits. Your brain cannot simultaneously build multiple new automatic pathways without degrading the quality of each one. Trying to install 5 new habits at once is neurologically similar to trying to run 5 major software updates on an aging computer simultaneously. Everything slows, nothing fully installs, and eventually the whole system crashes. The people who silently build organized lives apply an almost aggressive version of the one thing rule. They identify the single behavior that would create the most positive downstream effect on everything else in their life. Then they do only that, consistently, every single day, for 30 days minimum, before they even allow themselves to consider adding something new. A retired teacher in her early 60s transformed her health so significantly that her physician said her blood work looked like that of someone 20 years younger. Her starting point was a single habit. Before every meal, she drank a full glass of water. That was the entirety of month 1. She didn't change what she ate. She didn't start exercising. She didn't overhaul anything. She drank water before meals. For 30 days. Nobody would have posted that. Nobody would have found it remotely interesting as content. But after 30 days, it was automatic. It required no thought, no decision, no discipline. And she had cognitive space, emotional space, and the confidence that comes from actually completing something, to add one more small change, then one more. 14 months later, she had lost over 40 pounds and was taken off 2 medications. The transformation looked dramatic. The process was almost aggressively undramatic, one invisible, boring step at a time. Habit 4. They subtract before they add. The modern approach to getting life together is almost entirely additive. More systems, more apps, more structure, more commitments, more goals. More content consumed in service of becoming more productive. And the industries built around personal development are financially incentivized to keep you in that addition mindset indefinitely, because addition requires purchasing, and the appearance of progress is often enough to maintain that cycle. What almost no one in that space will tell you is that subtraction is frequently more powerful than any addition you could make. Not because minimalism is inherently virtuous, but because your cognitive and emotional resources are genuinely finite, and everything you maintain in your life, every active commitment, every relationship, every obligation, every subscription, every recurring responsibility, draws from that finite pool, whether you're consciously aware of it or not. Think of your daily mental and emotional energy as a phone battery. Most people start each day at what feels like full charge, but running in the background, invisible and unnoticed, are dozens of open applications, commitments maintained out of guilt, relationships that consistently drain without replenishing, obligations accepted months or years ago that no longer serve any real purpose, digital subscriptions for services barely used, weekly meetings that produce no decisions and resolve nothing. Each one individually seems negligible. Collectively, they drain your battery before the actual demands of your day have even begun. An entrepreneur who had gone through a complete financial collapse and spent 2 years rebuilding described his single most significant turning point as the week he made what he called his "stop doing" list. He wrote down, in plain language, everything in his life that was consuming time or energy without producing meaningful return. Then he spent the following 2 months systematically removing each item. He left 2 social media platforms entirely. He ended several professional relationships that had become purely transactional and consistently draining. He stopped watching morning news, which he calculated was costing him approximately 45 minutes of daily anxiety while providing 0 actionable information. He canceled 4 subscriptions. He declined a volunteer position he had accepted under social pressure and had resented since the day he said yes. The effect was not what he expected. He anticipated feeling lighter. What he actually felt was clearer. As if, he said, someone had cleaned the windshield he'd been driving behind for years. Same road, same car, completely different ability to see where he was going. And the things he had feared losing, the relationships, the platforms, the positions, felt enormous before he cut them. Within 2 weeks of each elimination, he said, he could barely remember why he had held on so long. That is the nature of dead weight. It feels essential until the moment you release it. Then you wonder how you ever carried it. Habit 5. They schedule rest before they schedule work. Most cultures, and nearly all productivity culture, treat rest as a reward, something earned after sufficient output. And if the output never feels sufficient, which it rarely does for driven people, the rest never fully arrives. You collapse periodically from exhaustion and call it a weekend. Then you do it again. The research on elite performers tells a fundamentally different story. In a now famous study of professional violinists, the top performers were found to practice fewer total hours per week than the second-tier group. Fewer hours, higher performance. The difference was in the structure. The top performers worked in concentrated 90-minute blocks, followed by deliberate, intentional rest periods. Not half-scrolling on a phone, but genuine recovery. Walking, lying down, letting the mind move without direction. The second-tier group practiced more hours, but in scattered, unfocused sessions with little structured recovery, and their ceiling was consistently lower regardless of their accumulated experience. Your brain and body operate in cycles of exertion and recovery. This isn't a philosophy, it's physiology. Sustained high-quality output requires sustained high-quality recovery. Ignore the recovery long enough and performance doesn't gradually decline, it collapses suddenly. And when that collapse happens, most people interpret it as a character flaw. They call themselves lazy. They say they lack discipline. They redesign their motivation system. What they actually need is sleep. The people who silently maintain organized, high-functioning lives treat rest with the same intentionality they bring to their most important work. They block sleep time and protect it the way they'd protect a meeting with someone whose opinion of them genuinely matters. They take genuine breaks between focused work sessions, 10 to 20 minutes of actual recovery, not digital distraction. They protect at least 1 day per week from productive expectations entirely, not out of laziness, but out of understanding that the human system requires genuine recovery to maintain sustained output. 90 minutes of fully focused work, followed by 20 minutes of genuine rest, repeated 3 or 4 times across a day, produces more high-quality output than 8 hours of continuous low-grade effort. That's not a motivational claim. It's a documented finding. And it's a finding that nobody will ever post about, because protecting your rest looks like nothing from the outside. The results, over months and years, look like everything. Habit 6. They keep their plans to themselves. This is the one that cuts most directly against the current of modern culture, and it's the one with the most consistent psychological research behind it. When you share a goal you're planning to pursue, when you tell a friend, post about it, announce it in a group, your brain receives a preview of the social reward it would normally only receive from actually achieving it. The encouragement, the validation, the genuine enthusiasm of people who care about you. All of it activates the same reward circuitry that completing the goal would activate. Researchers call this premature sense of completeness. Your brain, having received a portion of the reward, registers slightly less urgency around doing the actual work required to earn it. The announcement functioned as a partial substitute for the achievement. This is why the person who films themselves on day 1 at the gym so often doesn't make it to day 30. Not because they're uncommitted, because the social reward of the announcement quietly reduced the neurological drive to follow through. The performance of beginning displaced a portion of the energy required for continuing. The people who transform their lives in silence understand this, consciously or not. They keep their plans internal. They don't post the new routine. They don't tell their friends about the 30-day challenge. They don't create accountability partnerships for things they could simply do. They just do the thing. Quietly, consistently, in private, without external validation serving as fuel. And something interesting develops in that silence. When there is no audience, there is no performance. When there is no performance, what remains is a very clean, very private relationship between you and the thing you're building. Many people who have practiced this describe the silence itself becoming a source of motivation rather than an absence of it. There's something genuinely powerful about carrying a private mission, something only you know the full weight of, something that belongs entirely to you, that no one can comment on or critique or diminish. It burns on internal fuel, and internal fuel doesn't run out the way external validation does. When people eventually notice, and they always do, they ask when it happened. The answer is always some version of the same thing. In the quiet. Every day. In rooms where nobody was watching and nobody was applauding, and the only evidence that anything was happening was the slow, invisible accumulation of days. Habit 7. They review their direction every week without fail. If you only evaluate where your life is going twice a year, you are essentially navigating by looking in the rearview mirror at 6-month intervals. By the time you notice significant drift, you have been moving in the wrong direction for months, and the correction required is proportionally larger and more disruptive. The people who maintain organized, intentional lives course-correct continuously, not daily. Daily self-evaluation creates a kind of anxious self-surveillance that's counterproductive. Not annually. Annual reviews are so temporally distant from the decisions they're supposed to inform that they're largely ceremonial. Weekly. Once a week, same day, same time, roughly 20 to 30 minutes, 3 honest questions answered without softening. What worked this week? Not what felt good. What actually produced the outcomes I care about? What didn't work? Not what was hard. What genuinely failed to move anything forward or actively moved things backward? What am I changing next week? Not a list of resolutions. One specific adjustment based on the honest answers to the first 2 questions. A financial consultant who spent the first decade of his career in what he described as organized chaos, high income, zero financial clarity, perpetual sense of being behind, said the weekly review was the single intervention that changed the trajectory of everything. He does it every Sunday evening, 25 minutes. He made a point that reframed how I think about improvement. Most people give themselves 10 opportunities per year to evaluate their direction. He gives himself 52. Over 5 years, that's 260 deliberate course corrections versus perhaps 10. The compounding effect of that frequency, even when each individual adjustment is small, produces a fundamentally different destination over any meaningful time horizon. Nobody will ever find this habit interesting. There is nothing filmable about sitting quietly on a Sunday evening answering 3 questions in a notebook. But the life that practice builds over years is the one that everyone else describes as impressive or disciplined or somehow natural. It's none of those things. It's 52 course corrections a year, practiced in private, for as long as it takes. Habit 8. They prepare the evening so the morning is already decided. The productivity world's obsession with morning routines has produced an enormous blind spot. Your morning is not primarily determined by what you do in the morning. It's determined by what you did the night before. With mathematical reliability, a chaotic evening produces a chaotic morning. Go to bed with an unresolved environment, no direction for tomorrow, and a mind still processing the last thing you watched on your phone. And you will wake up already behind, already reactive, already in catch-up mode before the day has technically begun. The evening reset is not a wind-down ritual, it's a preparation protocol, and it has 3 distinct components. First, a physical reset of the immediate environment. Not a cleaning session, just returning the space to a neutral, ready state. Dishes done, surfaces clear, tomorrow's clothes selected and laid out. Anything needed for the following day already positioned where it needs to be. Second, a mental extraction. Writing down whatever is actively circulating in your mind before sleep. Unresolved worries, outstanding tasks, ideas you don't want to lose, conversations that haven't been finished. The purpose isn't to solve any of it. It's to transfer it from your working memory onto paper so that your brain can stop holding it during the hours you need it to be recovering instead. Third, a screen cutoff at minimum 30 minutes before sleep. Not primarily for the blue light argument, which has been overstated, but because screens deliver a continuous stream of novel stimulation, and novel stimulation is the precise opposite of what your nervous system needs to transition from alert wakefulness into genuine rest. A nurse working rotating 12-hour shifts in an environment of constant acute stress said that if she could keep only one habit from everything she'd learned about managing her own life, it would be the evening reset without question. She said it takes her approximately 12 minutes on even the worst nights. She said the difference between doing it and skipping it is the difference between waking up as someone who has a day ahead of them and waking up as someone who already owes the day something. 12 minutes, less time than most people spend selecting something to watch before bed. Habit 9. They make their most important decisions when they're actually capable of making them well. Decision fatigue is among the most well-replicated findings in behavioral science and among the most consistently ignored in how people actually design their lives. The premise is straightforward. Your capacity for high-quality decision-making is finite each day and degrades with use. Every decision you make, from what to eat for breakfast to how to respond to a difficult message to whether to accept a new commitment, draws from the same cognitive pool that you need for the decisions that genuinely matter. By the time you face something important, you may be operating on what remains after dozens of small decisions have already drawn down the account. The people who silently organize their lives have a practical solution to this that requires effort only once. They identify the decisions they make repeatedly, the same choices appearing day after day, week after week, and they make those decisions in advance, during moments of calm, rest, and full cognitive capacity, so they never have to make them again, the moment. They decide on Sunday what they're eating every day of the week. They lay out the next day's workout clothes before bed, so the morning decision has already been made. They create personal operating rules, small standing policies that eliminate entire categories of daily choice. One senior executive who described years of feeling controlled by his schedule rather than in control of it, said his turning point came when he built what he called his pre-decided list. Around 20 recurring situations, each with a predetermined response that he'd set when thinking clearly, and then simply honored automatically. He always takes stairs for fewer than 4 floors. He never reads messages before 9 in the morning. He eats the same breakfast on every weekday. He declines any meeting invitation that doesn't include a clear agenda. He leaves social events by 10 regardless of how they're going. He estimated those standing decisions eliminated between 35 and 40 individual choices per day. Over a year, that exceeds 12,000 decisions he no longer had to make. 12,000 moments of cognitive energy returned to the work, the relationships, and the thinking that actually deserved it. From the outside, he appears calm, decisive, and unhurried. From the inside, the explanation is far simpler. He made most of his decisions already. Habit 10. They are completely honest with themselves in private. This is the foundation beneath every other habit on this list, and it's the one that nobody teaches, nobody incentivizes, and nobody can do for you. Most people maintain a carefully constructed internal narrative about who they are and why their life looks the way it does. They tell themselves they're too busy when the honest answer is that they're avoiding difficulty. They tell themselves they're unlucky when the honest answer is that they're avoiding risk. They tell themselves they value health while making choices daily that directly contradict that value. They tell themselves they want change while organizing every day to ensure nothing actually changes. These narratives are not malicious. They're protective. They reduce the psychological discomfort of the gap between who we intend to be and who we're currently being. But they also make genuine change nearly impossible, because you cannot redesign what you've convinced yourself isn't broken. The people who quietly transform their lives practice something different. Once a week, usually during that weekly review, they sit with themselves in complete privacy. No audience, no performance, no softening. And they ask the questions that are genuinely uncomfortable to answer honestly. Am I actually moving toward what I say I want? Or am I creating the appearance of movement while staying in place? Am I spending my time on the things that matter, or filling hours with things that feel productive without producing anything real? Is there something I already know needs to change that I've been postponing by calling it not the right time? Is there a pattern in my behavior that I keep attributing to circumstance rather than to choice? There is no one to answer to in this practice, no one to be impressive for, no one to maintain a narrative for. And that absence of audience is exactly what makes it functional, because when there's no one watching, the only available option is the truth. A therapist who has spent over 2 decades working exclusively with high-performing individuals, executives, athletes, physicians, people who by all external measures are functioning at a high level, said the single strongest predictor of genuine sustained change in her clients was not intelligence, not resources, not education, not even the intensity of their desire to change. It was the willingness to be honest with themselves in private, when no external pressure existed to force it. The clients who could sit quietly, look at where they were genuinely, falling short, and face that reality without deflecting into excuse or blame or catastrophe. Those were the clients who changed, consistently, over time, in ways that lasted. Not because honesty is magical, because you cannot organize what you refuse to see clearly. You cannot improve what you've decided to pretend isn't there. And you cannot build a life worth living on a foundation of comfortable self-deception you reinforce every day. If you're ready to apply that level of honesty to how you actually operate, and you want a concrete, simple, 5-minute daily framework to build genuine mental discipline from that foundation, the K.M.A. method is the most direct path I've found to making that practical. Not a course, not a complex system, 5 minutes, real structure. The link is in the description. Take a look before it closes. Every single habit on this list shares 3 qualities that matter. They are completely invisible from the outside while you're doing them. They are deeply, almost offensively boring in the moment. And they compound over time in ways that look almost impossible when you eventually look back at where they started from. That's the actual mechanism. Not a morning routine filmed in perfect light, not a productivity system with an acronym, not a public declaration on the first day of a new month with 100 people in the comments saying they're doing it too. The transformation happens in the quiet, In the first protected hour when the world hasn't gotten in yet. In the 12-minute evening reset that will never be interesting content. In the 20-minute Sunday review that will never trend on any platform. In the pre-decided rules that return 12,000 decisions a year to better use. In the private honesty session that no one will ever validate or witness or applaud. The world will keep celebrating the loud reinventions, the dramatic before and afters, the influencer-approved morning protocols, the accountability challenges, with thousands of participants and a 30% completion rate. Let it. That industry exists. It will always exist. Because while everyone is busy performing change, the people who actually change are doing what they have always done. One boring, invisible, quietly compounding habit at a time. In rooms where nobody is watching. In silence. Now I want one honest answer from you in the comments, not a vague one. Look at these 10 habits and tell me the specific one you're most consistently skipping, the one you already know you need but keep finding well-constructed reasons to delay. Name it by number if you want. Name the specific reason you've been avoiding it if you can. Because naming it precisely, in public, even if only to strangers, is the first act of the kind of honesty this entire video is built on. And you might find that someone in the comments is carrying the exact same thing. If this gave you something real, share it with one person who keeps restarting and can't understand why nothing holds. Not for the view, because that person might need this more than you did. Subscribe if you're not already here. No hype, no performance, real frameworks built to last, delivered in the only way they've ever actually worked, in silence. The only approval that matters is the kind you give yourself, quietly. At the end of a day you actually lived with intention. When the lights are off and nobody's watching. Start there. Tell no one. See you in the next video, and hopefully with a more organized routine.